This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Clive Bull.
LBC, I'm Clive Bull with you till 8, and we're going to talk now about HS2. MPs from the north are urging a rethink on HS2. Do you think that this high-speed railway link is really worth the money? 0345 6060 973. I've got a feeling that most people don't now. And yet, the government, most MPs, Labour, with a few exceptions, are all behind this. Are you? 0345 6060 973. Labour's leadership is under pressure, we understand this weekend, to reconsider its support for HS2. There is growing concern, especially amongst MPs in Northern England, that the plan fails to address their area's economic needs. Several senior Labour MPs told The Observer that the huge sum of money earmarked for the project, which connects London and Leeds and later Manchester via Birmingham in the first and second phases, would be better spent doing something else, possibly just connecting the northern cities one to another rather than linking back to London. How much will all this cost? Well, that's a good question. The government finally committed to building HS2 in 2012 when the budget was £33 billion. And that's, 6 years ago. 33 billion, OK? The costs were then revised upwards. So by the next year, it had gone up to £42 billion. And then in 2015, £55 billion. Now, well, anybody's guess, really. It's possibly, some estimates are putting it at over 100 billion. We know that some billions have already been spent, and not a mile of track has been put down. That's just on consultants and on compulsory purchase of land and so on. So is it time for a rethink? Do you favour HS2? Obviously, it is a big project. It will create jobs. Trains you might consider are the future. Cars we're running out of space for. Are you behind this? Let's talk first to Richard Houghton, who's director of HS2 Action Alliance. Hello, Richard.
Good evening, Clive.
Thank you for joining us. So, well, obviously you think we do need a rethink.
Yes, we've always felt it was a rethink, and I'm not surprised now with the economic environment and the uncertainty around Brexit that a number of Labour MPs are breaking ranks. We've always been told privately that there's little support amongst parliamentarians for the project, but, once these things get going, they're very difficult to slow down or stop.
Yeah, I mean, are you hopeful that there might be some sort of rebellion? The government and Labour, the opposition, are officially in charge.
Yeah, I think I don't see it being a rebellion, to be honest with you. I think probably the economic reality is going to hit. They spent £4 billion so far on planning. I think we're on our fifth chief executive. They've got over 300 people earning over £100,000 a year. They're having to pay over prices because people don't want to get involved in the project. So I think probably what's going to happen is, I think post-March next year, whatever your politics are, we know that the economics of the UK are in decline for an extended period of time. I think we'll just run out of money. It took, just to give you an example, Clive, HS2 took 3/4 of all spending on trains last year.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's not good, is it? I mean, I'm a fan of trains, but I think there are probably more pressing needs in terms of expenditure.
I mean, realistically, we've already seen electrification cancelled to Cardiff. We've all seen it in the Midlands and the North as well, because there isn't the money. HS2 was a political project from the beginning. It helps to understand how we got here. Andrew Adonis, who was a former journalist who became one of Tony Blair's number 10 team, was brought in by Gordon Brown in the last 18 months of his government to show he could play nicely with the Blairites. Adonis wanted a fast train. It wasn't on the top 20 of the Department for Transport at the time, a list of things that needed doing. So he had to create HS2 Limited, a quango outside of the department, to get it forced through. They've had 6 goes at the business case. It still includes the fact that nobody works on trains to make it a positive return on the money that's being spent. And, obviously, the growth in intercity travel has been at zero for the last 5-6 years. It's growing steadily in commuter routes at 6% a year. Unfortunately, HS2 does nothing for that, obviously, because by the very nature of a fast train, it goes from London to Birmingham.
Shouldn't we be better at doing fast trains intercity, though? I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I was in France and using their system, and it's fantastic. In comparison, they're fast, they're spacious, they're modern. Aren't we a bit behind with all of that?
It depends which way you look at it. We already have the fastest intercity travel in Europe because we're a small island, so unless you're going to start moving
but you don't have to go so far.
North, so per mile it's quicker. I think if you want economic growth, which is what people talk about, you need to start connecting the east and west of the north of Britain, as some of these MPs are suggesting, and then connect it to Scotland. What we know from France and Spain, and we know from the government's own business case, HS2's own business case, that this will draw money to London. London is 9 times bigger than the nearest city economy. All the evidence is that, the large corporates will close down their regional offices in Manchester if they can do it in a day. This is what happened in France and Spain. The jobs, officially 28,000, 27,000 of those will be in London. And the only way they could get some data together to look at the wider economic impact is to abandon the Department for Transport's own approach and pay a private company to come up with a report that says that it will grow the economies, assuming there's unlimited skilled workforce and unlimited capital.
So you're worried it may have the opposite effect then, that rather than taking business to the north, it might take people and business away and into London?
Yeah, Digby Jones, who, former head of the CBI, who's a Birmingham man, said it will turn Birmingham into a dormitory town for London. Yeah, all the evidence is that's what happened in Spain and France. Why would you, if you can increase your salary by 20-30%, but keep a good quality of life outside of the capital at a house you can afford? This is a nice way of commuting. It's going to increase the commuting distances from, say, Milton Keynes into Birmingham. I say all the evidence is there that this is the case. There's been some very good reports on the need to grow the northern links between the cities and then into Scotland before you connect it to London. And I think one last thing that people seem to forget or ignore, because it was well hidden, there's £6 to £6.5 billion of cuts to current train services from northern cities that aren't on HS2 into London to help pay for it. So many places are going to end up with a much worse service. They're going to lose the services that they have now.
What about this suggestion from the Rebel MPs who are saying, instead of HS2, let's do the northern bit instead. Let's have better connections between northern cities rather than the bit to London. Would you agree with that?
We've already got great connections to the capital. The vast majority of transport funds are spent in the capital. As I said, because we're a small island, we already have comparable connection times. We do have some funny pricing issues, and we do have first-class carriages. So there are ways of reducing the overcrowding, but you've got to remember that the West Coast main line is already the least crowded at rush hour. It's only at 42%. Connect the north, connect it to Scotland, build a thriving economy there, and then if you still feel you need a fast train to London, you can do it. But what you don't do is spend up to, the Treasury leaked a document that said 75 billion. I think that's probably fair. You don't build the most expensive railway in the world, producing huge environmental damage because you're trying to go straight rather than down an existing corridor, a transport corridor like a motorway. You do it sensibly, but this has been put together on a fag packet in 18 months in a rush, which is why the business case doesn't stack up.
And your prediction is then that it won't actually happen, it's going to be put on ice at least?
No, I think they'll probably build it to Birmingham because a lot of people are going to make a lot of money out of it. I don't think it'll get beyond Birmingham, mostly because the demand isn't there. As I say, city travel isn't growing. If you think we're going to have 1,500 people on a train every 3 minutes from London to Birmingham, I think you're living in cloud cuckoo land. Unfortunately, the environmental damage and the damage to people's homes and livelihoods will be done. I don't expect it to get beyond Birmingham. And it may not get as far as Birmingham if the fallout the economic fallout from Brexit is severe as some predict, and we don't know what's going to happen after March, do we?
Maybe we should have a referendum on HS2.
I think what we should do is follow the Department for Transport's guidelines. They're there for a reason, and we shouldn't let unelected members of the House of Lords run around on trains and get excited about things, which is what happened in this case. And then, of course, there's always people who want their nose in the trough, and there's money to be made. Crossrail was meant to be finishing, although that's running over budget and over time, and the construction industry was looking for something to do next. I get that. But it's been put together in a rush by somebody who's rather more excited than trains than they should be. And it really hasn't been thought through. So I'd agree with the MPs. Let's get the rest of the country working properly before we start adding to what are already excellent services to London. And so one last thing, Clive.
Yeah.
When we started it was going to connect to the Eurostar. It doesn't do that. You now have to walk down Euston Road with the pollution. It doesn't connect to Heathrow. That was all in the first 32 billion budget. We're now at 56. So really we're connecting a very fast train from the outskirts of Birmingham, it's a 15-minute walk into the centre, to Euston. There's been no thought about the additional passengers into the underground, which is already overcrowded. There's been no mention of the Sunday service going into Euston for 8 or 10 years as they close 5 platforms. There's been no mention to the environmental damage. The people who've got houses beyond 60 metres of the line who are getting zero compensation, and now got houses they can't sell, or if they can sell, they have to sell them with negative equity. There's all of these things, because it wasn't thought through and planned properly, that have happened. And, it's no longer sexy. We did have a period of people talking about it, but obviously Brexit dominates now.
Right.
So
Crikey, the government not thinking something through. Who'd have thought it?
Well, the last thing I'd say is if somebody turned up to Manchester, Sheffield, Birmingham and the other northern cities and said, I've got £56 billion, do you want a faster train link to London? I'm fairly confident that every mayor would have said, absolutely not. Give me my $6 billion and I can do a phenomenal amount of good for my city.
Indeed. Well, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Houghton joining us from HS2 Action Alliance. So he's got a very clear view there. We're getting a lot of calls in on this and a lot of messages coming in. I've got a feeling not many of them will be in support, but please feel free, if you are in support of this, to call us as well.
Clive Bull on LBC.
LBC, I'm Clive Bull. We're talking about HS2. Senior Labour MPs are urging a rethink. Is it worth the money? 50 billion, I said earlier, but it could be double that by the time it's done. Rebecca in Brixton. Hello, Rebecca.
Oh, hello, Clive. Good evening. Nice to speak to you. Hi. Yes, I'm in Brixton, but I was brought up in Great Missenden in Buckinghamshire. Mm-hmm. And the HS2, so it comes out of Euston, sort of underground, and then it, depending on the topography of the countryside, then it comes up for air just at the top of the Chiltern Hills where my mother and her husband have lived for 20 or 30 years. And in fact, my stepfather has farmed that land around there for 50 years. To cut a long story short, I have just gone to visit them in their new home. They have been forced to leave the beautiful cottages they made, and all their friends have left. So it's a beautiful community at the top of the Chiltern Hills there, and everybody has gone either compulsory purchase or different, some people have sold. Eventually, the government bought the house off my mum and her husband. It's really traumatic for them, and they're still not okay. They're quite elderly. As you may know, that area of the Chilterns is a site of scientific special interest. It's also emotionally very strongly connected to Roald Dahl's novels. He set them all in the woods there. All the wildlife's going to be damaged. And all the natural pathways will be permanently rerouted. You'll never be able to walk the road that has been there for hundreds of years because there'll be these permanent concrete tunnels that people will be forced to walk underneath. And also, South East England is one of the most populated areas of the whole of Europe, and the countryside is really precious. And I like you, though, I do love trains. I get that. But like your previous caller, this whole, I think he's right. I think it's going to be sort of feeding into London. And I would just like to just highlight that the permanent destruction of this, of great areas, the whole top of where Mum's home still, I think it's empty at the moment. They're about to put in, I don't know what, they rent it out cheaply. It's going to become an industrial zone for 10 years with, lots of porta cabins where people live and diggers and... Yeah, that's
it must be very upsetting and emotional. Part of me thinks, well, if it was a good idea to put this railway, you have to put it somewhere. Someone is always going to lose their house. Some area of beauty may well be affected. Otherwise, we'd have no railways.
I know. The cost is so extreme, and this is like a little personal reflection. So I'm a primary school teacher. I work in lots of different schools, different areas. It's not the only thing I do. I'm now what's called a supply teacher. I work in some of the most impoverished areas in the whole of Europe. And then the government is wanting to spend 50 billion on this railway. I haven't even got enough pencils for the kids. I'm working with no teaching assistants. I mean, it's really serious, Clive. I mean, obviously, there are different areas. We've got transport, we've got education, but money is spread like butter. It can be spread wherever it wants. And it's also really interesting, actually, Clive, because that area is a Conservative area and Chequers is just down the road. However, of course, the train doesn't go near Chequers. Not close enough, and Chequers hasn't been pulled down. So I'm just sort of pointing out the balance.
But it's very strange. I mean, my gut sort of agrees with you about this. It just seems a huge amount of money. But sometimes you do have to have these big projects, and I guess the government and the opposition are in favour because it's a huge project that will create jobs. It supposedly will create industries as well. It certainly would create jobs just in building the thing in the first place. So they would say it's an investment. You're spending that money, but you're going to get money back. Whereas unfortunately, buying pencils for the school doesn't have that immediate response, does it?
It certainly does when you're there and you've got 30 kids.
I bet you need it. No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But they're going to say, well, that's expenditure, and you'd have to wait generations for that expenditure to sort of come back into the economy.
Yeah, I get all that, and I'm like you, I love railways. I've travelled around India and many other countries around the world, and I absolutely adore railways. Just the countryside in England, it feels like it's just also being slightly pushed over. Greenbelt is just, it's green for a while until actually we give a few backhanders and we get in there. We've got people also the emotional health of my mum and her husband and all their friends has been severely affected, and that also, of course, then impacts on the national health. I mean, okay, I'm pulling tangents here a bit, but there are so many ripple effects. Also, the wildlife, very precious, the badgers, and I met some, when I was walking up the other day, my mum's still like a homing pigeon. She's still taking our adorable spaniel up there because that's where they've been forced to leave their home. It's massive, Clive, I can't tell you. Yeah. It's massive, and it was such a good community. They're a really strong community, and that, again, affects mental and emotional health.
Of course.
It's so... Yeah. And, you mentioned France, your previous guest mentioned France. France is enormous. The population is spread over a much bigger area. So,
yes. I know. I mean, I was on a train that went right the way through France. It's huge compared to this country. And most of the time, I was looking out the window all the time, and there was nothing there. It was just empty fields, and they've just got huge amounts of land, which we don't have. Rebecca, very, very interesting to talk to you. Thank you for that. Some of the messages coming in here. HS2 is old technology. I would fix the existing trains first, says Tony. This one says, the main reason HS2 is being built is so that the EU, German and French trains can travel through the UK without changing. The EU isn't worried about damage to the countryside. HS2 is a complete waste of money, not wanted by the majority of people. Don't compare England and France with Spain. They are much bigger countries. And Bernie says, scrap HS2 and flood wire the country with fibre to every house and every business. Make this kingdom a tech island for the world in the 21st century. Well, that, I think, is probably, again, what's going through people's minds. When you think about this issue, you've got, let's say, £100 billion to spend over the next few years. Would you spend it on this when there are so many other things competing for that money? Let's talk to Andrew in Chigwell. Hello, Andrew.
Yes, good evening.
Evening.
I am actually in support of HS2. Yes.
Good.
And the reason for it is Britain is always very, very good at pointing out why we shouldn't have things, stopping projects, and leaving things to the last minute.
But all right. But what about HS2 in particular then? Of all the things you could spend £100 billion on, is that the project? Do we really need a super high-speed link to Birmingham?
You can always look at alternates to spend money on.
Yes. What about the fact that we're a little country? We haven't got room for all these. We're not?
We are not a little country. We may have little land mass. However, we are the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world.
Yes, but we haven't got the land mass, as you say, to do what they do in France with all these very big, very fast super railways. We don't have the same space. We're going through ancient woodlands. We're having to knock down houses.
Does that mean that we should have little steam trains and quaint little slow trains going up and down the railways?
Well, that's what we have got. That's the trouble. I mean, we're building this, and you still can't get a fast train home from Victoria Station.
Well, hence, that is another thing entirely.
Well, but it all comes down to priorities. But I really appreciate. Well done, Andrew. I was hoping somebody would call in favour of HS2. FRASER in Cardiff, hello.
Hi, Clive, how you doing?
Very good. What's your view on this?
So generally I'm against it. I just want to put a bit of an economic perspective on how much money this is actually going to cost. Say that it cost about £100 billion, right? So I work as a mining engineer. So from the work that I do, I can see how much it costs to build some of the world's biggest open pit mines, right?
Right.
You could probably build 10 of the world's biggest mines and employ thousands of people for, say between 20 and 50 years for the same cost that it's going to cost to build this. So when people say, it's going to be good for the economy, it's going to be good for jobs, there's absolutely no way that this is going to be comparable to doing these big engineering projects which are going on, around the world right now. And, just taking another perspective, thinking about the technology and what's going on, other companies are developing now. You look at what Elon Musk is doing with his reusable Falcon 9 rockets, right? He basically is launching each of these, state-of-the-art rockets. They cost about £50 million each time you launch it. So for the same cost of launching, you could actually launch 2,000 of these reusable state-of-the-art rockets for the same cost as building this, rail line. So you've got to think, there's so much more which we could be doing with this money if we just used our imagination and our ambition and actually used evidence-based policy making rather than, emotional and, political, movements doing it instead.
I mean, looking through some of the tweets on this, some people are making the point that they think, even though we haven't even built it yet, that it is going to be old technology by the time it's done, that we should be thinking more about even more modern ways of travelling.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, for example, all these new electric cars which are going to be coming out and driverless vehicles, you've got to think, well, maybe within the next 20 or 30 years, there's going to be a lot more electric and driverless car sharing systems, available. Why aren't we investing more into that technology? I know that we are trying to develop that something in the UK, but, it just seems like we're putting the cart before the horse here.
OK, very interesting, FRASER. Thank you very much. Sandra in Bramley, in Rotherham. Hello, Sandra.
Hello, Clive.
Hi, what's your thought on this?
Well, my thought is I'm against HS2 altogether. I agree with what everybody else has said. It's out-of-date technology. It's going to cost too much and it's destroying too much of our countryside. I think there are better options than HS2. But in particular, I'd like to talk about Phase 2B from Birmingham to Leeds, because whether you agree with HS2 or not, nobody in the right mind could agree with the spur that they're taking Sheffield off the high-speed line to Midland Station. We don't get any high-speed service in South Yorkshire at all. So to say it's benefiting the north, it's not. It's certainly not benefiting South Yorkshire, and it needs looking at again.
I can't remember how the map works now. Are you saying Sheffield is cut out of that?
It is.
Yeah.
The line comes up and it goes London, Birmingham, Nottingham and Leeds. In between Nottingham and Leeds, Sheffield is taken off on the existing lines through Chesterfield into Sheffield Midland, and that is where HS2 currently ends. HS2 showing a link from Sheffield Midland back onto the high-speed line into Leeds. That is total. It's very misleading, because that Northern Loop, as it's known as, does not exist at the moment, and it might never exist. So at the moment, Sheffield is being taken off the high-speed line to a dead end in Sheffield.
Right.
And South Yorkshire is getting all the grief, all the local villages are being annihilated, but we're getting absolutely nothing from it.
No benefit from it, no.
Not
But
at
is
all.
any of it necessary anyway? I mean, I've got trains from London to Sheffield many times, and it feels fine to me. It doesn't take that long. It's perfectly comfortable. Why do we need a super fast one?
We don't need a super fast one. I'm afraid this train it's costing all the taxpayers. Well, at the moment, at 50-odd billion, it's costing every taxpayer in this country about £5,000. And out of all those taxpayers, there will be a very small proportion that actually ever use this train. Why aren't they putting it into the NHS that we all use, or into defence that we all need, or police, or things like that? There are alternatives to this really expensive train. And as sort of northern MPs are saying, surely the east-west connections up in the north are much more important than just a few minutes on a journey from London to Leeds. Yes,
I mean, you tell me, somebody's just texted here saying it takes ages to go from Liverpool to Leeds via Manchester. They need to be looking at east to west connections.
Yeah. Well, if the HS2 is taken off on this spur into Sheffield, there will be no high-speed connection from Sheffield to Manchester or to Leeds. We are totally cut out of the scenario.
Yeah, I understand. Sandra, thank you very much. All the pain and no gain in that area. Jason in Acton. Hello, Jason.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good. Yeah, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I actually agree with the train. The train, I agree with it. But let me give you my example, my own personal experience.
Yeah.
Me, I'm a young guy. I've got a young family. I've got 3 kids and missus, and I'm trying to find a house to buy. It's very, very hard for me, even in London. I'm moving on a stage, and it's very hard for me to find it. I've been considering outside London, but But the problem is that my kids, their family, and everybody's in London.
Have you thought about Birmingham?
Yeah.
Have you thought about
my
Birmingham?
mum has actually been talking to me. Why about Birmingham? I said, Mum, it's too far. The journey's too long. But now you guys are putting a fast train. Do you know how many people and how much people will be coming there and buying properties in Birmingham? How it's going to improve the community? How much projects are going to come into that area?
Except that somebody earlier on said, sorry to interrupt, but the point there is that really what you want for Birmingham? People all living in Birmingham and actually getting the train to work in London, it becomes a sort of dormitory town. It might be good for property prices, but it could make Birmingham dead.
How?
Well, because you won't be there. You'll be in London all the time.
You're going to have food. You're going to have restaurants. You're going to have in Birmingham. Not everybody's going to move from Birmingham to London. But after, right at the beginning maybe. Then after, slowly, people are going to be like, I'm getting good working around Birmingham. Then Birmingham's going to grow.
So you'd consider commuting from Birmingham and keep a job in London, buy a property in Birmingham?
Yeah, because I'm self-employed, so there's properties that I manage in London, so I have to come in and out.
Right.
But at the same time, I love the fact that the monies that I have for let's say for a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom apartment in London, I can get a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Birmingham, and at the same time, I can be in London within an hour. The same commuting for me from South East to London
Doesn't it feel a bit backwards though that? People are being sort of forced to move further and further out and travel all the way in. That doesn't seem like the way of the future. If anything, we should be travelling less. You should be able to live where you work or not even have to go to work.
I agree with you, but it takes time. And it takes time. The area needs to grow. The area needs to you need to have people in the area, businesses. If you're a business, I'm pretty sure you're a businessman, and I told you in this block there's so many people coming in, and they're getting paid London prices. You're more likely to set up a cafe shop just down the road.
Yeah.
Your business is going to be booming Saturday and Sunday. When I'm with my kids, do you think I'll be traveling to London on the weekend, on a Friday night? I'll be spending money in the local area. The local area
so
is going to
it's good for Birmingham, even if it means people actually travelling into London rather than the other way around. Good for Birmingham. Really interesting point, Jason. Thank you for that. Tony in Harrow. Hello, Tony.
Oh, hello there. Hiya.
Hi, what do you think?
Well, listen, I just think it's a complete... I just can't understand why they want to build it, the powers that be sort of thing. I mean, like people have said before, there's a lot of that you could use that money on a lot of other worthwhile things. Or even
why do you think they do want to do it then?
Well, I just think it's a political statement, I think. And to be honest with you, who's going to use it? Because I've spent 40 years travelling from London to Liverpool, and since Virgin took over, I struggle to afford it. So whereas you used to go every month, now I go, say, once every 7 months because I can't afford the tickets. So who's going to afford... It's only going to be like MPs on expenses and people like
business
that. Business
people.
Afford. Yeah, well, that's...
Well, what about Jason, we were just talking to? He says he'd like to live in Birmingham and sort of commute to Acton every day.
Yeah, well, he can do that now. I mean, how long... I'm sort of guessing at the figures if you want, but I know from experience, I think you can get to Birmingham from Euston in about 1 hour 10 or something like that. I mean, how much faster is it going to be? And another thing as well is since Virgin took over in the late 90s, the train from Euston to Liverpool doesn't stop at Watford Junction anymore. So rather where I used to get it from Watford Junction to Lime Street, now I have to go into London, spend half an hour going into London, and then half an hour later I'm passing where it started because they don't stop there. So the point I'm trying to make is if you have a high-speed train, yeah, it'll be fast, but it won't stop anywhere. People won't be able to get on it or off it. It'll be like London to Birmingham and perhaps a couple of priority stops. So for ordinary people, it just won't work, in my opinion.
All right, Tony, thank you very much. I think what grates with people as well is the trains we've got now are not up to scratch. There are very poor services on some lines. Some of the trains need updating. The service needs updating. Maybe spend some of those billions on what doesn't work. Chris in Sheffield. Hello, Chris.
Hi there. Hi, Clive. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. What's your thought?
Well, my thoughts are, if you forget about the London to Birmingham section for a moment and you just look at what's happening up in the north.
Yeah.
So there's two reasons, really, why the northern MPs, the Labour MPs in particular, are coming out and starting to now question this project. Yeah. Number one, they've just started to realise the sheer scale of the impact on the northern communities, that's particularly since the publication of the latest reports at the start of October. I mean, the route's going to smash through residential housing estates. They're trying to cut costs up in the north now. So what they're doing is they're building the route on embankments, some of them over 20 metres in height. It's on viaducts and it's an enormous cutting. So effectively, it'll almost be like the northern towns will be sort of under siege, really. Now, most of the MPs that are on the section of the route in the north are Labour, and I think they're all now starting to get a little bit concerned about the fact that the communities eventually will turn against them if it happens. So that's the first reason. And the second reason, probably of more significance, is the HS2 route through the north just doesn't work with the transport for the north plans. So what you've got in the north now is you've got HS2 proposing to spend nearly 26 billion of the 57 billion on the northern section, and you've got Transport for the North desperately trying to get the government to fund the connections between the northern cities. But unfortunately, the HS2 route doesn't work with the Transport for the North plan because it's simply in the wrong place. So what we're going to end up with here, if we're not careful, and I think this is why the Labour MPs and the MPs in the north are starting to pay a bit more attention to it, is we'll have a route from London that gets people from London to Leeds that will pass through South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire and North East Derbyshire. But nobody in the north past the sort of Nottingham area will get any benefit from it, because in the north at the minute you can't get from Sheffield to Manchester on a reasonably fast service. You can't get from Manchester to Leeds. The Transpennine routes are an absolute shambles. You can't travel from Bradford to Leeds to Liverpool. You know, the northern cities are effectively...
So hence their point about linking the northern cities then? That's what you think they're right
Absolutely,
to say, concentrate on the intercity links.
Over the past 12 months, with all the work that the campaign groups have been doing up in the north, and dare I say, educating the MPs to the real scale of the project, I think the MPs are now starting to realise that if the route happens through the north, Transport for the North will not have the funds to actually build the northern links, which is what we all want, because we want to be able to get from Sheffield to Leeds to Manchester to Liverpool.
Of course, understood. Chris, great point. Thank you very much. Apologies to others. We're out of time.